I'd like to introduce to you a concept that we in Healthy and Growing Churches have found very effective in transforming churches around this nation for Jesus Christ. It's called our Consultation ministry. Now, the Consultation ministry is really a process. And the process involves first getting the church to fill out what we call the self-study. They do a lot of work on their own. They look at their history as a church. They look at their community. How has their community changed? They look at their conversion rates. They look at a lot of different things. And they often will generate a report for us of 50 to 60 pages. And we take that report and we spend a lot of time in prayer. We have an intercessory prayer team that begins praying for that church when we get that self-study back. We then begin to analyze that information. What are we seeing God doing in that church? To understand where a church needs to go, it's helpful to understand where a church has been. And that's what the self-study helps us to do, is we then set up a weekend for the church. And in that church consultation, what we do is we come in and first interview all the staff. As we interview the staff, we look at their strengths and their job responsibilities and how they execute their calling that God's placed on their heart. But then usually on a Friday night, we will then meet with the lead pastor, and we listen to their dream. We listen to what God is calling them to do. We seek to understand what their gifts are and how God has uniquely equipped them to fulfill that unique calling, that vision in that community, in that church. Usually Friday night, then we'll do focus group. And the focus groups primarily are designed to give people in the body an opportunity to give us information. And we ask them questions like, what are the strengths of the church, and where, if there were changes needed, where would they see those changes needed, and then where would they like to see the church go the next 5 years, 10 years. So we get a lot of information from the church. On Saturday morning, we then meet with the leadership board without the pastor. In that leadership board, we ask many of the same questions we asked in the focus group. As we meet with the leadership board, we get the input of the leadership. At that point, we begin to process the information. Having done this at least 50 or 60 times, we've learned a lot about churches. We begin to share some of the things we've learned about church health in the context of a life cycle. At that point, Saturday afternoon, usually it's me or someone else is presenting that information to the church in an open session, while the rest of the consultation team is meeting by themselves, trying to figure out, what do we do with all this information? Out of all this information, we come up with usually 4, 5, 6 recommendations. We present those recommendations on Sunday after the morning service, and then we ask the church to take a couple weeks and pray about those, and then to vote on those. If that vote is positive, then we will go and spend another week or two looking at that recommendations and those reports, and then say, if that's going to happen, how are we going to pull that off? Because a lot of those recommendations are going to cost money. How am I going to get the money to help them accomplish what we really feel they need to be accomplishing? Then we write out what we call a covenant, and in that covenant we say that we come back to the church and say, given to accomplish these 5 or 6 recommendations, here is how we're going to do it. This is who's going to pay for what. This is how, actually, every one of those steps, we break them down, and we give that back to the church. And we ask the church, okay, why don't you vote on that again? And if that's positive, then we begin a 3-year relationship with that church where we are involved in coaching the pastor, or if there's not a pastor, we're involved in helping select that pastor. And we meet with that church for 3 years. It's been fun because we have about a 95% positive vote rate of these churches that go through this. And in that 95% of the churches that have done that, it's really exciting. And I can give you many testimonies of just churches that have radically turned around. I want you to hear a few pastors who have actually experienced this whole process. Hear what they have to say about this.
The way I look at a consultation, it's a very deep and insightful look at the life of your church. It's designed for people who have a passion to build growing churches.
That churches love to self-diagnose. We know what our deal is, we know what the problem is, we know the prescription. And in my experience, 90% of the time, maybe higher, we're just wrong. It takes somebody from the outside coming in, looking at you, who's studied churches, studied ministry, and can say, nope, time out, here's what the problem is.
The Holy Spirit really makes these kind of things take place in the life of our church, but He does that through human instruments most of the time. And so what the consultation is helping you draw upon the experience and the expertise of outside people.
I think it can be beneficial to any church at all. I'm a big believer in the covenant relationship, about a commitment, a partnership in ministry. I don't know how that couldn't help any church of any size, of any structure.
And I was trying to communicate to our leadership without a lot of success. When you bring somebody in from the outside who says what you're saying, for some reason, with some people it lands. It's almost like they need to hear it from somebody outside of the organization.
I do not believe this church would continue to flourish or be fruitful today if we had not taken this step. I do not believe I would have survived as a senior pastor apart from this step. And they've encouraged me and supported me.
I've never felt like they stuck their nose in my business or tried to, they only came when I needed them, but when I needed them, they came.
The beauty of this whole process, they don't want to tell you how to do ministry. They want to find the heart of God in your congregation and in you as a leader and help make that a reality. It's the difference between doing things connected or detached. You know, it's always easier to be connected. You know, detached, you're out there on your own trying to figure this thing out on your own, and I don't care how close you are to God, the kingdom is never meant to be lived that way. It's meant to be lived in community and covenant and mutual relationships and partnership.
Now that you've seen a little bit about the consultation ministry for healthy, growing churches, you may ask yourself, how can we get involved? Let me suggest to you that probably the easiest way is just to email me at greg@healthygrowingchurches.org. We would love to come beside you. We'd love to come and help you do what God's called you as a church to do. And that's our passion, is to help local churches transform their communities for Jesus Christ.